Welcome to Slacker Moto Radio with Brad and Addison. Based out of the Pacific Northwest, we're talking motorcycles and the motorcycle community, and we're excited to have this hour with you. Here we go. Welcome back, Slackers. Brad, how you doing?
I am doing great, actually. It is a beautiful day outside. Planning on making a little trip to Eastern Oregon, maybe picking up a bike, waiting back for my response. But that could be happening, so I'm super pumped. Also picking up a new riding jacket this afternoon on my way home, and parts are arriving for the KLR, some new valves this evening. So kind of everything's kind of happening at once. Still a lot of work to be done, but pretty stoked. Can't complain. How about yourself, Addison?
Yeah, man, you're on the up and up here. Look at you. New bike, new jacket, new parts. I mean, there's nothing holding you back. Insert song here.
Yeah, I guess not. But what about you? What do you got going on this weekend? Anything fun? What have you been up to?
Oh, I don't really have anything going on. No, nothing happened at all. No, it's been a good week, man. This good weather you're talking about, we've had for more often than not in the last couple of weeks. So that's kind of nice. Having an opportunity at lunches to go just for a spin around the area or get a little, a couple of miles on each bike. So I've had that chance, had the opportunity to ride a bit. The garage needs a bit of reorganization. I picked up some tools and things that were just kind of thrown in as an evening pickup into the front of the garage. So I've got to organize things to be able to get to bikes and parts and work on things better. So this weekend, that's probably a big part of what I'll do is reorganize everything, get rid of what I don't need. We're talking about doing a garage sale type thing, so kind of get things ready for that, get some of the stuff out that I don't need that's taking up space, and be ready to move forward with other projects.
I hear you on the cleaning up, our workspaces or garage and such. We just did that, filled up an entire SUV. It's not filled to the brim, obviously, but filled up a good amount of the vehicle with stuff we're just donating. I mean, we could yard sell and probably make some money, and we probably got more that we would throw into it if we did that. But man, there's something to be said about just dropping it off and maybe throwing it on your taxes as a reduction of some sort. So, yeah, I got a load of stuff in the back of the Jeep pickup and a load of stuff in the exterior that needs to be taken somewhere. You want it?
I would say, sounds like you got to drop it off in my driveway, and we'll pawn it off for you.
Okay.
No, that's usually the end result, right? We'll put a bunch of stuff up for a garage sale, and what doesn't sell just goes into the truck and gets dumped at the local donation center.
Yeah, we're pretty picky. We if it's garbage, we get rid of it, and if it's something that somebody could use, then at least donate it. But I say that, and then you drop it off at somewhere like at least Goodwill, and it's like they make a pretty good chunk of money on all that. But that's beside the point.
Yeah, we try to use other facilities. I mean, not to throw shade on Goodwill, but we don't often use Goodwill. We'll go through Deseret Industries or even Salvation Army and things like that from time to time that are a little more service oriented, beyond just giving jobs to people, but in other aspects of what they do, right? Food and sustenance and support to those that need it. So
yeah,
we try to go to the more, the actual nonprofit side of those, just because I agree with you. If I'm going to donate something, the other thing we've used a lot of is actually some of the swap groups or giveaway groups on Facebook. We found the community give groups to be really good. I've gotten a couple of really cool things from it. I've given away a lot of things on it, and it's nice to know who it's going to, that they're looking for it, or they need it, and they have a real use for it, rather than just kind of dumping it in a bin at a local donation center.
Right. No, that's good. So I know that you picked up a few more things. Did you ever look into that backer board that I was talking to you about for protecting an area that you're going to have a grinder next to, so like your drywall and such?
Yeah, I didn't look at that yet. I'm definitely gonna do something. I can't. My my understanding of the heat created in that situation won't allow me to just throw it against the wall and use it. So I'll have to do something to that effect. And shutting the door on that topic.
Sounds good.
Um, but no, yeah, that involves more than just cleaning out some of the new stuff I've gotten. I'm kind of looking at the garage space, and now just based on how I have everything in my need to keep things clean. Right, if I'm working on an open engine case, I refuse to grind anywhere near it or drill anywhere near it or have that contamination in the area. Um, and so, realistically, I should have a wall where I've got kind of that stuff lined up that I can vacuum out and keep things arranged and tidy. Instead, I've got storage lined up in a way that works better for a garage, not as good for manufacturing and production type stuff. So I need to reorganize everything so that it's more usable on the fly without having to have a moment and move things to where it can be used or take it to a good spot. I'm moving things around more than I should be. It should just be in the right place to begin with.
Oh, it sounds like you just need a bigger place.
Well, that's always the right answer. Unfortunately, not often the most economic answer.
Yeah, especially right now, man.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
dude, housing market everywhere is just insane. Used bike market. I mean, let's get into that.
Man, yeah.
What is happening with? So we're looking for a used car, and you got about a day to pull the trigger from when it gets dropped off. Because if it's a car that's worth owning, within a day, someone else has bought it.
Wow.
And bikes are no better. I mean, a good bike in the used market at a fair price doesn't sit long, man. I've been to a couple of dealers in the last few weeks, and they just don't have much for used bikes. 3, 4 in the back. And they're the kinds that they're a dime a dozen and fairly cheap new. So people are, right. It's that questionability of, do I want to, $1,000 off what I can basically get new with 10,000 miles less,
Right. Well,
right?
and that's not helping that disparity between the two prices either. When there's only so many of them to be had, there's only so many new ones. So if I don't have it on the floor, I've got it in the back used. I can charge what I want. Right. I'll make you feel a little bit better. I'll take a little bit off of what a new one would cost you. But it's pretty insane, and I don't think that's going to go away for the next couple months, potentially this entire year. And I think some of that could be contributed to. I know that we just passed some legislation that's going to mean some money in not everybody's pockets, but a good amount of people are going to have a little bit of extra money potentially that they would use on a used bike, and so I think that's going to drive up the cost, and the demand is going to be high for the used market. And I don't think I'm the only one that's involved. I mean, we offline, you and I have talked about this briefly, but I know Harley is investing a lot into certified pre-owned all of a sudden to get young new riders in. And I don't even know how you can do that when we don't have the volume of used bikes, but they've got something up their sleeve. A lot of people are looking at it as the wave that they want to get on, because there's good money to be made, right? They get to set it. They're not being told. I mean, Harley having their own inventory of used bikes get to set those prices. But me, or if I had a used bike dealership, I no longer have an OEM telling me what I can sell a bike for. I can sell for whatever I want, and I can let the demand drive that. And all of what I make is revenue towards me over what I purchased it for, right? Aside from how long I store it. Right now, they're not having to sit on them for very long. So, yeah, if you're in the market for a bike right now, I'm sorry for you.
Yeah, I mean they're still there to be had, but you gotta be ready. So that's always the game with getting a good deal anyway, right? You gotta know what you want and be ready to jump when it comes. But used to be if you weren't quite sure, you could still get by, and those days, at least right now in our current affairs, you've got to be ready for that good deal or just any deal. If you're not ready to buy that bike that day, you very well might lose it. The old scare tactic that if you walk away, someone else will pick it up is fairly true nowadays. That's happening. But it's interesting to note. You're talking about the Harley's new certified pre-owned options and their new plan for that. And I've seen that at other dealerships from more of a dealership perspective. I've seen Triumph dealers do that. I've seen. I don't know that I've really seen it in the Japanese market, but I've seen some of the higher end bikes. Right, your BMW dealers will do that. Um, but I don't think it's ever really been driven by the manufacturer, driven by BMW or Triumph. It's been that dealer decides to go through and do a better check such that they're willing to, you know, give you a better warranty period or whatever comes with that, right? Willing to put their stamp on it much more than your average used bike. But yeah, Harley's making this a whole corporate policy. And I don't think it's bad. I've had conversations with Harley dealers, even in the last couple days, that, they talk about the fact that if you buy the newest version of Harley, to get it to the level they've got souped up bikes, they've got Harleys with better cams and I guess better is questionable, more powerful cams and more powerful components. That they're getting a much more horsepower and torque out of their bike, but you got to invest the same amount of money into a new one to make it match what they've already got. I think that's kind of been a problem with Harley, is it's been a similar bike for so long that you don't get a ton for buying a 5 year newer bike.
Right. Right.
So without them diving into their own used bike world, it's no, even in these articles or in Harley's own descriptions of this, they talk about it. It's not a secret that their own used bike market is one of the things that holds them back from selling new bikes. So kind of taking some of that control back. I don't know that it's a bad move. It's definitely a different move, but I don't know that it's bad.
Well, the question that I have is I understand that it is a move. We can call it a move, but really they've just come up with this policy that we're going to call anything that we sell, and obviously they'll probably have some rigorous checklist of things that they're going to do to call it certified pre-owned. But are they actually doing anything different, or did they decide that they need to instill reliability through some sort of buzzword like CPO, where people are looking for that in the car market and such? I mean, I just don't know how much of it's really changing, and or how they're going to um, play this out. Because I mean, right now, not looking at the inventory that it is right now, a few years ago, we used to go into a dealership and you'd go upstairs and they'd have like 40 bikes up there. And not all of them were ready, and not all of them were going to be sold immediately, and they were going to go through some process to hit the floor. Not all of them were Harleys even. So, I mean, I just don't understand how this is any different than what they've done in the past.
Yeah, and it really depends on how they handle it. Based on what I've read and what I've seen, it would seem that there's going to be, a more stringent check or a more specific review of the used bikes as they come in. They're going to be in a certain class of bike, right? Lower than X number of miles and newer than X year. There it's going to be something like that where there is definitely some criteria that meets it, because you can't just throw, a junker. I mean, I guess you can. Nobody's really stopping you from certifying a pre-owned junker, but that's not the intention. To your point, they're looking to instill confidence and reliability on a used vehicle that can be comparable to the new vehicle, right? If you can't afford a $30,000 bike, here's a $20,000 alternative.
Yeah, and I think that what it's going to do is I think that what they're trying to do is increase the amount that they can charge on a used bike. I think to some extent that's the case. Now, what that's going to do is they already know that for a lot of the models on Harleys that they hold their value fairly well, if not really well. Uh, and then other ones don't do as much. But there's already a pretty big cost difference between those model variations, regardless, like a Sportster versus one of their premium cruisers. So um, the question is it going to be something that actually hurts me or you if we were trying to sell our bike? Is it that we can already sell it for a pretty good amount? And, I can, even with fairly high miles or relatively low miles, I mean, you can resell some of those bikes at a good lick. So is the intent that they're going to just claim all of these extra things to try to pull me to want to take my bike in to have it consigned through them? Or how does that affect me trying to sell something of my own private party?
I think in the Harley world, I think that's the attempt, right? They're going to be the company or the group that makes a little profit off of each used bike as well as their new bikes, right? To help dealership profitability. Um, so you're not wrong there, but I don't know that it's going to have a huge effect on what, right, you and I would sell. If we had a Harley that we were looking to sell, then we may be able to get a bit more from the dealership if we know it's fits within the criteria for certified pre-owned. But if if it's not within that criteria, I don't know that it's going to make too much of a difference. So I don't think it's going to change much more than people that trade their bikes in as it is. I think it's going to be a pretty consistent flow. I think it's merely an attempt for Harley to get more people to bring a bike to them than to sell private party.
Sure. Yeah, time will tell how that really rolls out. Yeah, it's interesting that they're doing that, and we'll just have to see. I mean, they've got a vast amount of used bikes, right? I mean, Harley's been around for a long time. They've produced a lot of motorcycles. There's no reason why they shouldn't be trying to sell them. I know that they already do. And so how are they going to market this? I feel like it's more of a marketing thing more than anything else.
If nothing else, if I take a step back from this conversation, what I can say is Harley's doing a pretty good job of keeping themselves in the news. I think we've had 3 weeks in a row of something new or different Harley has released or spoken of. So, they're keeping themselves relevant. They're trying to make sure that they're the dealership or the manufacturer that we're talking about or that people are talking about. I think the Pan America created quite a buzz. We didn't really talk about it, but the maintenance factor of the Pan America is incredible. Hydraulic valves and different things that really are not unheard of on a bike, but for a Harley are pretty unheard of, especially. And so, they're doing these things that they continue to get them in the news, right? Continue to come up at the top. If you've got motorcycle news articles popping up in your feed, Harley's going to be there. And so, if nothing else, it's creating that buzz. It's creating that understanding that they're still here, they're still fighting, and they're still putting out bikes. So, I don't know if there's too much to read in until we really see it. I'm also, I question as someone who I feel is very proficient in reviewing a used bike, bringing the right tools to actually check everything that needs to be checked to ensure that you are making a good decision. That I don't really care whether it's certified or whether I go through and quote unquote certify it myself. Um,
Yeah, there's lots of things that they'll probably check potentially that you wouldn't do on a normal, even for an afternoon ride type of an evaluation. Just depends.
on a used vehicle like that, though, I mean, I've got myself a list. I mean, there's stuff coming on this in the future, by the way, so I won't get too deep into it for our podcast. But I've got a list of 170 different things that I'll check and review as I go look at a bike. So it's not, I may not pull the heads off and check the valves. That may be about the extent, unless there's, some bikes have a valve check window. You can actually go in and do that very quickly and very easily. So it's, it really depends on what you can do simply without really taking everything apart because you don't want to go to a used bike and disassemble the fenders and the tank and right that's excessive and often not considered good practice unless you know it's a project bike to begin with.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the last thing that I want anybody doing when they come and looking at my bike is taking the heads off and any of the parts. If you can't tell what you're looking at right now, then you're done.
Yeah, but at the same point, there's things you can quickly check. You can look at spark plugs. You can look at right. Most of those are very accessible, and I don't think that there's any harm in reviewing all of those items. Compression checks. These are things that you can do when you go look at a bike if you have the right tools, or if you hire someone to go and do that. Right.
Yeah, I would just let the seller know in advance what you plan on doing because you may get there and find out that they're not comfortable with somebody that they don't know touching a bike that they're still trying to sell for top dollar. I think that you'd be very surprised how many people would actually let you do that. But I understand, and I think that absolutely something that you should have a conversation with them about. And if you're not going to be able to do it, I mean, you need to decide whether or not it's that important to you.
Let me just say, keep an eye on the slackermoto.com site, and there'll be more about this.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
I know now people are going to be checking daily and irritated when it takes a few weeks, but check daily.
Ryan.
Yeah, yeah. There's that. Speaking of Ryan, we got a little blowback on that.
Ooh.
Ryan, we love that you're going to get a Japanese or a Chinese bike. We hope that you do. I want to call it out here. I think that following Ryan on a Chinese adventure bike, I mean, I can't call it an adventure twice, but his journey through life with an adventure bike is going to be awesome. And I know Brad has his apprehension about these Chinese bikes, but I would love to have a bi-weekly session or whatever we need to do to have just a quick snippet of what he's done, where he's at, what abuse he's done, how much money he's spent to add to it. any problems, any issues, or lack thereof, as we kind of document his adventure. So Ryan, hit us up when you get that bike.
Yeah,
I want to just say
that's
that.
what I'm excited for, is to just be able to have the conversation. I will agree with only that aspect.
I I think it's awesome. I am not going to get one, but I really hope he does.
Don't do it.
And I'll leave it at that. And both in a very positive way. I hope he does, and I hope it works out perfect. And he
Yeah.
abuses the crap out of it, and it runs as much as he wants it to, and it's amazing. Why not? Teach us all a lesson, man. Speaking of that lesson, got a awesome message this week from Ben. Shout out to Ben.
Hey, Ben.
We talked about CSC. I mean, we talked about CSC more, but more than just this once. But a couple weeks back, we talked about the I think it's the City Slicker, something to that effect. Their little electric bike. And Ben's running an SG 250, so a 250cc CSC bike, just a simple bike. But basically, from what I understand from his message, he says he specifically bought the bike for the engine size, price, maintenance intervals, and supposedly simple, straightforward service. So we are planning to see if we can get Ben to join us for a bit on a future episode and hear his experience with CSC. Because 2 years ago, I made the prediction that Chinese bikes, we're going to see a lot more of them. I appreciate that Ben reached out to us to tell us he's got one and that he's been riding it no problems, doing well. But I'd love to hear more about that experience. So
Well, he's the only person that I've heard of buying that bike specifically. Maybe he's the only one. I don't know. But no, I
no,
know
come
that's
on,
not true. I know that's not true.
come on.
And I still, we've had a lot of, maybe not the nicest things to say about Chinese bikes in general. And I think that they do have their place. It's just making sure that one understands what you're buying and what the differences are. And I think that they have come a long ways as far as reliability and function, even in the last, let's say, 15 years. Because I remember people buying bikes when I was getting out of high school, and 2006, 2007, and just thrashing them the first time they go out. So I mean, they're not at that point anymore. At least I hope. But Ben, join us. We're looking forward to that.
Well, there's something to be said about a 250cc gas, ICE engine, a gas engine that the technology isn't new, unique, or difficult for anyone to produce. And so really the ability to use that from a day-to-day basis and do everything that you need to do with it really isn't going to be something that has high expectations, right? I think that would be easier to maintain, easier to get parts for, more more reliable in general than a new technology like a lithium ion, or I don't think they're lithium ion, but an electric bike from an industry that's never played in that game, right? That's new and unique to really the whole motorcycle world
Yeah.
for the most part. I think there's a lot more risk in that with those city slickers than the SG 250, or they were coming out with all kinds of new stuff in the Chinese bike market up to the 600s and things like that. So I think I'm curious to see what the real life experience is, how it rides, what the feel is, and any maintenance or service that's been done. How hard was it? How hard was it to get parts?
Right.
We'll get some of that
Yeah.
information for
What
you.
what kind of bikes he's ridden in the past? Did he try anything else? How did it compare to anything that he tried? Yep. Yep. Definitely. Look forward
So
to it.
we'll uh, we'll hopefully have a lot more on that, but we'll set up a time to get that.
I guess we could always pretend if he doesn't join us that he's on the call and just answer questions, right? I mean,
Yep,
that's acceptable.
that's fair.
Okay.
I think we've got some voice changer boxes, or that's probably not even what they're called. I'm real good at this understanding how to record stuff thing, but
Is that what we're doing?
nonetheless,
Oh, confusing.
we're recording. Yes, this is live, Brad.
Whoa!
Say hi. Say hi to your mom.
Hi, your mom.
All right, well, that's fair. She might listen, so you're probably better off with that one.
Okay.
We yeah, the other point, I guess we've kind of skipped past it, but in Harley's attempt to regain some market share, it looks like Indian's been making some changes, and that's kind of what I want to talk about for the meat of this episode. Is there's a new FTR.
Is it new? I mean, it's definitely changed. I mean, why don't you elaborate on why you're saying it's new?
Well, historically, the FTR has had a handful of, let's call them complaints or quirks or things that people were less than excited about. Um, a couple things I learned actually in reading about the updates. Apparently, cold start, they're not good. I didn't know that, but apparently, it did not want to start in a cold temperature if you pulled it out of, right. You left it in the driveway on a freezing morning. that bike apparently struggles to start. I never heard that, didn't know that, and I hope that those aren't lies from the people that have been talking about it, including Indian's updates to its own bike. I doubt it is if Indian admits to it, but they resolved some cold start issues, which is a very interesting adjustment. But beyond that, it's always had. It's a new bike, right? It's a new type of twin in the U.S. market, or really world market, to have a V twin like that, of that size, in that feature set, on a naked sport bike like that. So there was some throttle control issues, which everybody's kind of got those quirks, right? Yamaha's renowned in their 900 triples to have weird throttle control issues. So that's a not abnormal, but throttle control. Trying to remember what else, but a handful of little
So
quirks
one of the
that
things that they
people
were
were.
looking at was being able to cool it better. So change some aerodynamics around that, some rear cylinder deactivation. I would still call them a model year update. I think that they're refining it and trying to place it into a certain market. It definitely, at least in the article that I was reading about it, it was referencing it as a naked street bike, and so I mean. That I know that another thing that they changed was lowering the seat height. I mean, it's definitely going away from the previous comment that I made about is it something that is a competitor for Harley Davidson and their new dual sport that they or adventure bike that they have going out. So
Yeah,
it sounds like when you start doing these kind of changes, it's definitely gearing towards a different target market. Not that I don't think that there could be some variations easily implemented to bring it into the same market as the Pan America, but time will have to tell in that regard. Um, I so I mean, do you think that these are the kind of things that you would want to see? I mean, understandably, being able to have more refined controllability of the throttle, that's important. That's critical. That's learning how people actually ride it, not just your engineers, not your designers, not the guy that races bikes all the time, but the people that are just riding the motorcycle. So I could see those kind of changes coming out. But I don't know what I think about some of the other changes so far. I mean, what are your perceptions on that? How does that change what you think of when you think of the FTR?
beyond that, you can read what's changed. You can read the updates, and specifically what India did from Indian, from any of these articles. Really, everything that's talking about the 2022 FTR is going to have all this information. And so we're not really bringing up anything new or unique here at this point. But what I want to get into is I don't think it matters, man. Like, some of it does. Obviously, reliability, cooling, some of this stuff I think is really important. And I'm glad that they're iterating and moving forward, as you have to, especially when it was such a new bike to the market. You got to do things to bring it up and make better on what was originally released. It's only been a couple years, so it's time for that update. It's time for that change. But really, what I noticed in a number of reviews, and not just the initial one that we were talking about, just amongst ourselves before, is a lot of people talk about the fact that it's become just a generic street bike at this point. That it's lost. I shouldn't even say that. That's putting my own interpretation on it without having ridden it. People specifically stated that it's lost some of its soul, and that's something that I've heard in multiple states. Of these articles, multiple people have mentioned it. Um, and it's interesting to me that when you're talking an American V twin, I think soul is a big part of it. So that's a big change. I think that makes a difference on the bike for your average buyer. I think when they get on the bike and want to feel what it feels like to ride it, that some of that is just the coolness of the heart and soul of that bike. But beyond that, I've heard that mentioned in many other bikes. I've been bike shopping, and I've ridden a number of bikes. I've had a handful of bikes, and there's definitely a difference from bike A to bike B. Name A or B, whichever bike you like or don't like or whatever. There's a difference in a bike's soul. But what does that mean? Like, right? They changed throttle response. They changed cooling. They changed seat height. How does that affect the soul of the bike?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely subjective, right? Obviously. But what I will say is the way that I look at a model year update, and if I'm going to say that it affects its soul, regardless of what that means, How does the model year change? Um, how do I perceive it? How would I talk to somebody about it? When I say that, hey, I got the new FTR, it now has rear cylinder deactivation. Wait, that's sure. I'm not going to brag about that, right? It might be something that's valuable, like you're talking about, maybe fuel mileage. Be like, yeah. One of the things that they implemented on this is, rear cylinder deactivation, so I get a little bit of fuel mileage. But it's not something that I maybe immediately go out and talk about because that's usually not the conversation point. Fuel mileage being the topic between one motorcycle rider and another. We already have this understanding that we're already getting better fuel mileage than the majority of the vehicles on the road, right? So, definitely an advancement, but maybe not a cool factor. So does that affect its soul? Maybe potentially, right? What am I going for when I'm talking about getting on my FTR? Am I going for, man, I got this new FTR 1200 for fuel mileage? Yeah, right? I don't think so. And then the other thing would be, okay, so am I going to go out and be like, hey, Addison, got the new FTR 1200? It is 1 inch shorter saddle height. Can you imagine that? That's amazing. Now, that may be different, though, if I'm talking to somebody else or a demographic of people that are shorter. Maybe early riders, or maybe some female riders are a little bit shorter or want a little bit lower bike, or an older rider wants to be able to get on this bike that doesn't want to have to tiptoe as much. But that's kind of, you can see how I'm shifting the area, the demographic of who's going to be purchasing. And I'm not saying that it's bad, but I think that those kind of changes do affect its soul. Now, also, if we talk about throttle response, if the throttle response is now doled out such that I can't rip it as hard, then that also can affect my perception on how it feels to ride the bike. Those are just some of my examples for how that, even though I'm not saying what soul is on a bike, but how I perceive a change in that soul. So, what do you think?
I think, if we think about bikes that have soul, right? The quintessential historical bike with soul is a Harley, right? You talk, most people would agree that a Harley has a certain,
I think some people would argue that it has no soul, though.
sure, and that's why I say maybe soul is the wrong word, but character. Let's just say character for the sake of this argument, right? Let's switch the word soul with character. But people say, Harley's got its own character. Some people don't like that character. Some people say it's too loud or whatever, right? Lumbering or whatever you want to say. It may not be your cup of tea, but you can't argue that a Harley doesn't have character. And I would really find it hard to believe anybody getting on a Harley and just running it. Let's just be as simple as around the parking lot of the dealership and not having a smile on their face due to that character of the exhaust and the engine feel and the vibration. That if you put that on paper, that stuff sucks. It's loud, it hurts your ears, you gotta wear earplugs when you ride long distance, or at least you should. The vibrations are bad for your hands and your feet and your butt, and it's not good for you. But at the same point, those kinds of things create a certain amount of mold that you have to mold yourself into to be used to that bike and really love that bike. And I argue that the best bikes that are the most loved are not the most refined bikes, that there's something you have to get used to.
Oh, this
And
is so subjective. This is so. I see
I don't
exactly where you're
know,
going. I see exactly
because
where
if
you're going.
you learn to love that bike by getting used to something small and somewhat insignificant. If a Harley rattled so much that you got, numb fingers within 10 miles, that would be a different
There
conversation,
are some that
right?
will, yes.
And there are some that will, and some of the older ones do, but some of the older, all the bikes of that generation did, right? We're not saying that a new Harley is doing that, and it keeps up with what's
So it's an old soul.
acceptable. Sure. But, there's a line of acceptability that you can't cross. You can't come out and say, have a bike that rattles itself loose as a brand new bike that just came out and say that it's, this is okay and acceptable, because there is a realm of safety. You got to have brakes that work, right? You got to have these things on as you increase and create newer bikes. The FJR or the FTR is the perfect example of this. That we are talking about a bike that's really new in the market. And what they did is they took some of that difficult to live with, just the smallest little tweaks, right? Things that were just kind of annoying. Yet most of the people reviewing it are saying, well, now it just doesn't have that feel of being that cool character filled bike. Now it's just another street bike on the road, right? Now it feels like I'm riding, any other bike. It's too smooth, right? It's not too smooth. Smooth is good. I'm not saying these are bad things, but it's just so smooth and the throttle response is so easy. I don't have to learn and get used to it. And so I can just jump on, and that's great. Day one, jump on, ride it. But at the end of a long day, once you figured out the bike, you're like, man, I rode this for 120 miles and I've not grown any closer to the bike than when I did the first time I rode it, which is good, right? I still love the bike, but those bikes with a little bit of quirk, a little bit of that annoyance that becomes love later, you learn after time, you're like, this is awesome. Because if my buddy jumps on this bike, he can't do what I can do because it's hard to control. And you got to get used to it and you got to learn it. And this is now my bike because I learned it.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but there's not one type of soul, and I think that to some extent that soul is different based on the style of riding that you're going to be doing. Why did I buy a bike? You
Hmm.
knew before you bought a Harley that they were loud. I think that's a bad example to some extent. I understand where you're coming from, and I don't mean to put that down. But what I'm saying is, you knew about some of those things. You knew what kind of people potentially, if we want to try to judge a specific group and say that's what they are. I mean, you knew what you were kind of getting into, and I think you kind of wanted that just a little bit potentially if you were getting on that bike. If you want something that you can go and do shenanigan type stuff on, you're going to buy a certain kind of a bike, and it's going to have a certain kind of a soul as a result of the kind of riding that you're doing. I think that what we're talking about here is a shift in the type of soul that the FTR has. It's not that it doesn't have soul. I think that it has changed, and that it may actually change the type or the kind of people that are going to start looking at that bike, for better or for worse, that is taking place. I think that they're still trying to find out where they are and what it needs to be. I don't know what the sales numbers were. Do you know? I mean, was it having any difficulties whatsoever?
I could tell you, I know that the first, I believe it was first 2 years, they were selling. I mean, they were selling out. They were doing very well. I don't think it was as hot as it grew older. I think it was, a drop. I mean, that's the case with any new, unique, right, bike. Where I think that's the conversation we have with the Pan America, right? That's going to come out, and because it's so different and so out of the norm for Harley, even if you're not a diehard, you want to be part of that new group and you want to buy one. But is it going to make it past year three, right? Or is it still going to be popular and
Is it going
top
to
of
be
the list
relevant? Yeah.
3 years in, right? Is anybody going to care? Or is is a KTM or BMW 1250, right? Is something else going to just say, yeah, okay, well, that was fun. These are still better. And so that was kind of with the FTR. I think that was the case, right? Oh, cool. An American V twin street bike, sport bike per se, right? Naked sport bike of that type. And I think then people got it and were like, well, okay. Or I can get, a 900 triple from Yamaha that'll run circles around this, right?
Well, I think it
When it
though
comes to the
depends. Like
street.
how close have you been following flat track racing? How important is the Indian name brand for you, and what you're going to be doing with it? Do you want to configure it for it to kind of look like a little bit of an adventure bike, even though that may not be its best niche market for it? Because they kind of had all of these different options for it, and I don't know how things have sold. Hopefully, we can have a conversation sometime with some of the dealerships, not to tear it down, because I still like the FTR in many ways, but to have a better understanding. And you want to say something? Go ahead.
Never used that before in real life. That works. Sorry, and now I've derailed the whole conversation with
You
that.
don't even know
But
what you were going to ask.
the problem I have is I agree. If you're that buyer that wants an Indian because you love flat track and what Indian's doing in flat track, then you're going to buy this bike irrelevant. And it's not like the sales have dropped to zero, after year two, but you're now in that core market. You've lost your universal love, right? And that's all I'm trying to get across. Is not that you've yeah, all right, Brad. Yes, you have something to say.
For those that don't know, we've got some weird tools right now. Okay, the only thing that I'll say about that is I would say that the reason why they made any change wasn't because they're like, hey, let's just do these things. It's probably the reason why, the most common reasons why somebody didn't purchase it on the sales floor. They took it for a ride and they said, it's just a little too high, a little too high. Didn't really like it. I'm trying to get used to the throttle. It's just not quite right, right? To your point, the little weird nuances potentially for those people that affected them. So yeah, I just, I'm just that's how all development is. It just depends on how stubborn somebody's going to be on being able to keep their bike the same way, or if they're going to listen to their customers. And to some extent, I commend them for listening to their customers if that's what they were doing.
I agree. And we've had this conversation on the side as well as on the podcast and with many a person. But sometimes even the best riders don't know what they really want. I've seen lots of people buy a bike that isn't really what they're using it for, isn't what they want. And some of that's for the best, right? Again, we're talking somebody that loves Indian for their flat track history and for what it is. Whether the FTR is the right bike for you or not, you want one because it is an FTR, right? And it is an Indian and it's their cool street bike and you just want it because it's not what you need. All you really needed was an SG250, small Chinese bike to get from your house to Rite Aid down the road. You didn't need anything beyond. I mean, you could have had a scooter, a 50cc scooter for what you needed, but you want one, so you got one. And I'm okay with that. And I have no problems with that. I think it becomes more of that universal marketability. And as much as I think we need bikes with that, I think there is a world where you need a bike that anyone and their mom. I mean, we talked about the Rebel 1100 last time, right? That it's so easy to ride with an automatic transmission and paddle, and switch shift and all this stuff that if you barely know how to ride a motorcycle, you can jump on that and go. And I think you need that in the world. I think the motorcycle world needs very accessible bikes. But I question on bikes like an FTR or some of the bikes that have more of a niche need. As an industry, I like that there's bikes that are quirky. I like that personally. And whether that soul agrees with me and that's what I want in the bike that I buy, I don't know, right? I'm probably not going to buy some of them, but I get it. And I can appreciate it and I still love it.
Yeah, let's have
What
to
do you
get
think,
on
Sub
one.
Zero?
I just want to get on a bike and try the FTR out. I know that a lot of what we're referencing was different journalists getting on a loaner bike from Indian. Uh, and even though they've said these are the changes, I think that things can continue to evolve before they even hit the show floor. So I'm interested to see how it really plays out and how Indian plans on marketing it as well as the next motorcycle that they're going to be producing, because I know that it can't be far behind.
I agree. And I do think that I mean, if you're watching the news, you've seen that Buell already has a response for the Pan America.
Buell, what is that?
So
Is a horrible. It's not even truly Buell. Come on, that's fake news. Fake news.
that's not fake news. But what I'm expressing is, Indians got something coming through the pipeline that they will also have a response.
Buell, the man, is no longer affiliated with Buell the motorcycles. That is fake news if you think otherwise. 100% truth. Look it up. It's just wild. But I absolutely agree that there is something in the works, and I can't wait to see what it is.
So
And I'm talking
confrontational.
about Indian, not Buell. I don't care about Buell right now.
As we're clearly trailing off and winding down, I'm also supposed to mention to you that I got a response as well. So we heard from Ben. We talked about Ben. Got a response from the Chicken Hawk, and he took a short ride on the Chicken Wing. Decided he's keeping it. So he appreciates your concern before about getting something different, but wanted me to make mention to you that he's glad you're his biggest fan, and he'll keep the old bike.
Well, I'm glad he's my biggest fan, and that he's
If I
keeping the
didn't
bike.
mention
That's
that,
good.
he'd stop talking to us. So
He
I
would.
had to say something.
I love,
No, probably not.
I love you, Dad.
He might be one of our biggest fans.
I don't know.
If you think you're a bigger fan than the Chicken Hawk, send us an email. You can find our email at slackermoto.com. Let us know. Let's start a huge war on Facebook. Everyone versus Chicken Hawk.
Let's see how that plays out. He would have too much fun with it.
He would. He would definitely enjoy that far too much. But yeah, feel free to check us out. All those locations. We appreciate you listening in. I appreciate everybody sticking with us. We've had kind of some changes in how we're releasing these. I'm sure if you're listening to this, you've already figured it out, but we're kind of coming in every other week on Sundays. We're going to spend more time planning, prepping, and getting bigger information, bigger news, a lot more coming down the pipeline. So, yeah, beyond just listening, make sure you're keeping an eye on slackermoto.com or our Instagram and Facebook pages for some of the news coming out as we go about a few new ideas for this, including some shop time. So if you want to learn how to wrench on your bike or just join us and wrench on your bike with us, keep an eye. We'll appreciate that and look forward to talking to you here in a couple weeks.
Until next time, ride on!